The wind on the Broken Yoke Ranch didn't just blow. It bullied. It came howling down from the Absaroka Range, a relentless bully that scoured the paint from the barn, snatched the breath from your lungs, and etched fine lines around the eyes of everyone who dared to live in its path. It was a wind that demanded a certain kind of fortitude, a breed of people who were as sturdy and unyielding as the fence posts they drove into the hard Montana earth. The Whitmore family had been that breed for 3 generations, their names synonymous with grit and cattle. But lately, the wind seemed to be wearing on them, picking at the seams of a legacy that was beginning to show its age. At the heart of the Broken Yoke, and the only reason it still functioned, was Ellara Whitmore. At 28, she was the family's quiet engine, the one who rose before the sun to start the coffee, who mended the fences, who kept the books, who cooked the meals, and who, without complaint, performed 1,000 small, unseen miracles a day that kept the sprawling operation from collapsing into chaos. She was, as her own mother had once kindly, if unthinkingly, put it, the practical one, and in the blunt parlance of the ranch hands and the neighboring community, she was the plain, unmarried sister. The phrase followed her like a shadow. It wasn't said with malice, not exactly. It was just a fact, an observation as clear as the Montana sky, where her younger sister, Rosemary, was a sunbeam, all golden hair, laughter, and a smile that could charm a rattlesnake. Ellara was the dependable Twilight. She had her mother's sharp cheekbones and intelligent brown eyes, but her face was too angular to be pretty, her frame too lean and work-worn to be soft. Her hair, the color of dark earth, was perpetually escaping from a functional braid, and her wardrobe consisted of faded jeans, sturdy boots, and flannel shirts that had seen better decades. She was invaluable, of course, the very foundation of the ranch, but she was the foundation, not the view. Her father, Jeremiah Whitmore, leaned on her more and more, his gnarled hands a testament to a lifetime of labor. He loved Ellara with a deep, unspoken gratitude, but his affection was a silent, practical thing, expressed in a gruff nod of approval rather than a warm embrace. He saw her competence, not her loneliness. He saw the ranch she kept alive, not the woman who yearned for a life beyond it. And Rosemary. Rosemary was a whirlwind of vivacious need. At 25, she was the sun around which the entire household orbited, a role she inhabited with the natural grace of a born star. She had returned from a failed attempt at finding herself in New York, her pockets empty but her spirit as bright as ever, and had installed herself in the ranch house as if she had never left. She was wonderful company, a burst of laughter in the silent halls, a flash of color in the drab kitchen. She was also, to Ellara's perpetual exhaustion, a demanding guest. "El, sweetie, can you bring my coffee to my room? I had the most terrible sleep," Rosemary would chirp, her voice a melodic lilt from the top of the stairs. "Ellie, the hem on my riding skirt is loose. Could you have it fixed by this afternoon? I'm going to the Claytons for lunch," she'd say, pressing a wad of expensive fabric into Ellara's work-calloused hands. "Lara, you have to help me pick out a dress for the Founders' Day dance. I need to look spectacular. It's so important," she'd exclaim, dragging Ellara away from a pile of mending to a mountain of her discarded stylish clothes. And Ellara, who had never once in her life been called sweetie or asked to a dance by anyone, would oblige, because that was her role, to be the steady, plain, reliable sister, the one who made everything easier for everyone else. She had accepted it, had even taken a grim sort of pride in it. The ranch needed her. Her father needed her. Even gilded, golden Rosemary, in her own careless way, needed her. It was a purpose, if not a life. The rhythm of the Broken Yoke was broken by the arrival of the new cowboy. His name was Leaf, and there was nothing flashy about him. That was perhaps the most disarming thing about the man. He was tall and lean, moving with a quiet economy that spoke of a deep familiarity with hard labor. His face was sun-browned and weathered, with a strong jaw softened by the hint of a permanent squint from years under a harsh sky. His eyes, a calm and steady shade of gray, missed nothing. He'd been hired through a friend of a friend, a drifter with excellent references and a reputation for being a hard worker and a man of few words. He was, the foreman had said, a solid hand. Ilara noticed him, of course. She noticed everyone who came and went. It was her job, but she noticed him for his silence. In a bunkhouse full of boisterous, good-natured men, he was a quiet island. He didn't tell tall tales, didn't guffaw at crude jokes, and didn't try to grab a piece of Rosemary's attention. She saw him at meals, always at the end of the long table, eating with a steady, unhurried pace, his eyes downcast. He never made a mess, and always tipped his hat in her direction when he came in for supper, a simple, polite gesture that somehow felt more profound than the more boisterous greetings of the others. One evening, the relentless wind finally gave up its assault, leaving behind a sky of such deep, bruised purple that it seemed to be holding the very air in its palm. Ilara was cleaning up the kitchen after supper, the clatter of pots a lonely sound in the huge house. The bunkhouse men had retired, and her father was dozing in his chair by the radio, the low murmur of a ball game, a comfortable drone in the background. Rosemary had long since abandoned the table, claiming a headache, and was upstairs with her door firmly shut. Ilara was scrubbing a cast-iron skillet, her mind wandering to the next day's chores, when she heard a light, hesitant knock on the kitchen door. She frowned, wiping her hands on her apron. It was late for anyone to be needing something. She opened the door to find Leith standing there. He'd taken off his hat, holding it in his hands, and he looked, for the first time since his arrival, a little uncertain. "Evening, Miss Whitmore," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate in the quiet air. "Evening, Leith," she replied, a little flustered. "Everything all right? Is there something wrong with the bunkhouse?" "No, ma'am. Everything's fine," he said, shifting his weight. He was silent for a moment, and Ilara felt an uncharacteristic flush of heat creep up her neck. She was acutely aware of her flour-dusted apron, the dishwater-wrinkled skin of her hands, the stray strands of hair escaping her braid. "I was just wondering," he began, his gray eyes meeting hers, a startlingly direct gaze that made her breath catch, "if you might like to come to the Founders' Day dance with me tomorrow night." The question hung in the air between them, fragile and absurd. Ilara blinked. Her mind, so practical and ordered, stumbled, unable to process the words. She had been asked to a dance before, once, by a pimply boy named Bobby when she was 15. He had been trying to get close to Rosemary. This was different. This man was looking at her, only her. He wasn't looking over her shoulder for a glimpse of golden hair. Her father stirred in his chair, and a low, disbelieving snort escaped him. "Did I hear that right?" Jeremiah Whitmore rasped, his voice laced with a baffled amusement. "Leith wants to take you to the Founders' Day dance. You know that's a local shindig, son. Folks'll be asking after the Broken Yoke's share of the livestock. Not dancing." The words were a pinprick, bursting the strange bubble that had enveloped Ilara. She saw it all so clearly then. Her father's genuine confusion, the sheer improbability of it, of her. Leith, however, didn't flinch. He just kept his gaze on Ilara, as if her father hadn't spoken. "I know what it is, sir," he said, his tone respectfully firm. "I ain't asking to discuss cattle. I'm asking Miss Ilara." Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs. She looked from her father's bewildered face to the quiet, earnest man in front of her. In the background, unbeknownst to her, Rosemary's door had creaked open, and a whisper of expensive perfume drifted down the stairs. It was that, more than anything, that pushed Ilara over the edge. It was the sound of her old life, the familiar role she was expected to play. For one breathless, terrifying moment, she wanted to be someone else. Yes, she heard herself say, the word escaping her lips in a half-whisper. I would like that. A smile, slow and genuine, spread across Leith's weathered face. It changed him, erasing years of hardship and making him look almost boyish. Well, all right then, he said. I'll pick you up at 7. He tipped his hat to her, gave a brief, respectful nod to her father, and turned to walk back into the peaceful twilight. Illyra stood frozen in the doorway, the cool evening air swirling around her. She felt as if she had just jumped off a cliff and was still in midair, waiting for the impact. She closed the door and turned to face her father, who was staring at her with an expression of profound shock, as if his trusty old tractor had suddenly sprouted wings and flown away. Her own confusion mirrored his. What had she just done? Why had this complete stranger, this quiet, gray-eyed drifter, asked her to the dance? The next 24 hours were a strange, suspended reality. Illyra, in her shock, found a part of herself she had long forgotten. With a tremor in her hands that had nothing to do with cold, she dug through the back of her closet and pulled out a dress she hadn't worn in years. It was a deep forest green, a simple sheath of silk that her mother had bought for her at her charity auction in Billings. It had been too fine for her, too bold, and she had shoved it away, embarrassed by its very existence. Now, she held it up. The color, she realized with a jolt, was the exact shade of the pine trees at dusk, the same deep green as his eyes had been. She pressed the dress, her mind a whirlwind of anxiety and a fragile, unfamiliar hope. She spent an hour washing her hair, using a lavender-scented shampoo that Rosemary had left in the bathroom, and meticulously braided it into a crown around her head. She stared at her reflection, the sharp angles of her face, made more severe by the severe braid, the work-worn hands, the sensible, plain woman who stared back. Would he be disappointed? Would he see what everyone else saw? A sudden wave of nausea rolled through her. She had made a terrible mistake. She should have said no. Across the house, Rosemary was in a state of controlled panic. The news had spread through the house like wildfire. Illyra, plain, dependable Illyra, going to a dance with a man, a handsome new cowboy at that. The injustice was a physical blow to Rosemary. It was not how things were meant to be. The precious spotlight of attention was suddenly, inexplicably, pointed away from her. She couldn't let it happen. She tried to talk Illyra out of it. "Darling, you can't seriously be going with him," she'd cooed, lounging in the doorway of Illyra's room. "He's just a drifter, a nobody. He probably just felt sorry for you, working yourself to the bone." Maybe Illyra had said, refusing to meet her sister's eyes. But he asked. It was the only answer she had, but it felt like enough. She spent the afternoon in a fog, trying to carry on as usual. She mucked out stalls, fed the chickens, and tried to ignore the curious, and often amused, stares from the ranch hands. Everyone knew the news was a better story than the price of beef. Illyra, the plain, unmarried sister, was going to the Founder's Day dance with the new quiet cowboy. At 6:30, as dusk was settling in, she went to her room to get ready. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely work the zipper. She slipped into the green dress, and it fell perfectly, the silk whispering against her skin. She looked at herself again in the mirror and barely recognized the woman who was staring back. Her angular face, now framed by her elegantly braided hair, seemed less severe, more sculpted. She had used a touch of lipstick, a dusky rose she'd found in the bottom of her drawer, and it brought a faint, unexpected warmth to her face. Her brown eyes, the color of good earth, appeared darker, deeper. For the first time in her life, Illyra looked at her reflection and didn't see the plain, unmarried sister. She saw a woman. The doorbell chimed at precisely 7 o'clock. Illyra took a deep breath, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs, and walked down the stairs. Her father was in his chair, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his face a mask of barely concealed bewilderment. Rosemary was there too, dressed in a stunning dress of sapphire blue, her hair a cascade of gold, a scowl of pure disbelief on her beautiful face. She was going to the dance too, of course, with the son of a wealthy rancher from the next county. But the spotlight was supposed to be on her. It was the natural order of things. Ilera opened the front door. Leith stood there, no longer in his work clothes but in a clean, dark suit that fit him well. He had shaved, and his dark hair was still a little damp. He looked handsome, in a rugged, unpolished way. When he saw her, his breath caught, his gray eyes widened, and he stared, a look of pure, unadulterated wonder on his face. "Ilera," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "you look beautiful." For a second, Ilera couldn't move. She felt the words sink into her, a warm, healing balm. No one had ever called her beautiful, not her father, not the men in town, and never with that look of stunned reverence in a man's eyes. A smile broke across her face, trembling at first, then solid and true. It was a smile Leith had never seen, one that lit up her whole face and chased away the shadows of her life. "Thank you, Leith," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "You look very handsome." He offered her his arm, and she took it, a tremor passing between them. As they turned to leave, Rosemary stepped forward, an easy, practiced smile back on her face. "Well, well, Ilera," she chirped, her eyes sweeping over Leith in a way that was both assessing and dismissive. "You're looking different. Good luck keeping up. He's a stranger, remember." She moved to slip her hand through the other arm. "I'll keep you company on the other side, Leith," she said with a dazzling smile, "so you don't feel too out of place." But Leith, without looking at her, gently but firmly stepped away, keeping Ilera close to his side. "Thank you, Miss Rosemary," he said, his voice flat, "but I'm not looking for company. I'm here with Ilera." The words were a door slamming shut. Rosemary's smile froze on her face, her perfectly manicured hand hanging in the empty air. Ilera saw the shock and the fury flicker in her sister's eyes, and for a moment she felt the pang of something that might have been pity. Then Leith was guiding her down the porch steps and towards his old pickup truck, and Rosemary was nothing but a silhouette in the window. The dance was held in the town hall, a cavernous wooden building that had been decorated with bunting and fairy lights. It was a sea of familiar faces, ranchers and farmers and their families. As Ilera walked in on Leith's arm, a hush fell over the crowd near the door. Heads turned, whispers sparted. "Is that Ilera Whitmore? My God, she's wearing a dress. Who's that with her?" Ilera felt their stares like physical pricks, but Leith's hand on her arm was a steady anchor. He led her to a small table, pulled out her chair, and then went to get them punch. He didn't seem to notice or care about the attention. He was focused on her, his gray eyes warm and intent. As the band started to play a slow, old-fashioned waltz, Leith stood and extended his hand. "May I have this dance, Miss Ilera?" She looked at his outstretched hand, a hand that was calloused and capable, a hand that worked as hard as hers did. She placed her own work-roughened palm in his. "Yes," she said, her voice for him alone. "I'd love to." He led her to the dance floor. She was rusty, stiff, and as awkward as a newborn foal. But Leith was a gentle teacher. He held her firmly but not tightly, his lead clear and patient. He didn't try to throw her into fancy spins or show off. He just held her and moved in a slow, steady circle. It was like dancing with a part of the landscape, as solid and reliable as a Montana river. "Where did you learn to dance like that?" she asked him, finally relaxing into his rhythm. He gave a quiet, self-deprecating smile. "At a lady who ran a boarding house where I stayed a few winters back. She taught me. Said a good man should know how to treat a woman on a dance floor. I never really had a reason to use it until tonight." The simple honesty of his words made her heart ache. "Why me?" she heard herself ask. The question she had been too afraid to voice all day. Why would you ask me? He looked down at her, his brow furrowed slightly. Why wouldn't I? He asked, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. I've been watching you for weeks, Alara, since I first got here. I see you. I see you working from dawn till dusk. I see you taking care of everyone else. I see the way you look at the sky when you're walking back to the house at night, like you're talking to the stars. You got a soul in you, Alara, a deep one, and I wanted to know more about it. Is that so strange? Lara was speechless. For years she had been invisible, a piece of the scenery, a tool to be used, and this man, this quiet, perceptive drifter had seen her, the real her. A sob of pure emotion lodged in her throat. Don't cry, Lee said softly, his thumb brushing a tear from her cheek. I'm not trying to make you sad. I'm trying to dance with the prettiest woman in the room. She didn't protest, didn't correct him. She just looked up at him, the world outside their slow, perfect waltz fading away. There was no ranch, no rosemary, no father, no whispers. There was only the quiet rhythm of the music and the steady beat of his heart, which she could feel through the thin silk of her dress. Later, as the night wore on and the band played faster, more boisterous tunes, Leith proved to be just as comfortable in a two-step. Alara found herself laughing, a sound so unfamiliar to her own ears that she startled herself. She was having fun. Real, unadulterated, joyful fun. She saw her father across the room, nursing a beer with a cluster of old ranchers, shaking his head slowly, a look of dawning, bewildered understanding on his weathered face. He was witnessing his plain daughter transform into a woman, a beautiful, happy woman, and he didn't know what to make of it. Rosemary was there too, clinging tightly to her wealthy date, her brilliant smile a little too fixed, her eyes darting constantly to the corner of the dance floor where her plain sister was being held so tenderly. The dance ended. They walked out into the cool, clear night air. The sky was a canopy of stars, so bright and dense they looked like a scatter of diamonds on black velvet. They didn't head straight to the truck. Instead, Leith led her to the bandstand, a small gazebo where the musicians had played, now empty and quiet. It's beautiful, Alara breathed, looking up at the stars. It is, Leith agreed, but he wasn't looking at the sky. He was looking at her. Alara turned to him, her heart in her throat. She saw the same reflection in his gray eyes that she had seen in her own mirror, a woman, not a cipher. Thank you, she said, her voice a whisper. Thank you for asking me, for tonight, for seeing me. Leith reached out and took her hand. His fingers were rough, but his touch was impossibly gentle. My folks passed a few years back, he said, his voice low. I've been drifting ever since, looking for a place to settle but not finding the right one. I think maybe I was just looking for the wrong thing. Maybe I was looking for a place when I should have been looking for a person. He looked away from her, up at the stars. I got no money, no prospects but my 2 hands and a willingness to work. I got nothing to offer a woman but my word and my time. But I look at you, Alara, and I feel like I just got home. Alara felt tears stream down her cheeks, hot and unstoppable. She wasn't crying from sadness. Not anymore. It was a release, a letting go of years of being unseen. Leith released her hand and cupped her face, his thumbs gently wiping away the tears. Don't cry, he said again, a gentle smile on his face. I got to ask you something. What? She managed to choke out. This ain't the dance floor, so I can't ask you to dance, he said, a spark of humor in his eyes, but I figure the question is the same. Her breath caught in her throat. I'm asking you to supper, Alara, he said, his voice steady. Tonight was just the start. I'm asking you for our whole life. I'm asking you if maybe you'd like to take a chance on a drifter who ain't got much but who's got a whole lot of love to give to the right person. I'm asking you to let me be your husband, if you'll have me." The words were so simple, so utterly lacking in guile, that they struck her with the force of a physical blow. A whole life, a husband, him. A laugh bubbled up from her chest, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. It was a laugh that echoed in the quiet night, a laugh that was full of promise and freedom. "Yes," she said, the word, a sob, and a laugh, and a prayer all rolled into one. "Yes, I'll have you. I'll have all of it." He kissed her then, a soft, gentle, tender kiss that tasted of the mountain air and the wild mint that grew by the creeks. It was a kiss that sealed a promise between two people who had found each other after a lifetime of being lost. It was a kiss of thunder and of grace. The next morning, the wind on the broken yoke was still, the sky clear and brilliant blue. Illyra came down to the kitchen, not in her work clothes, but in a simple cotton dress, her hair loose and shining. Leith was already there, a cup of coffee in his hand, talking quietly with her father. Jeremiah Whitmore looked different too. The lines on his face seemed softer, his eyes holding a new respect as he looked from his daughter to the quiet man who had seen what he had been blind to for so long. Rosemary appeared, her golden hair in a silk robe, her face creased with exhaustion and a petulance that was starting to look like a permanent fixture. She saw Illyra, saw the radiance on her face, saw the way Leith's hand immediately found hers, and her mouth opened to deliver a scathing remark. But Illyra met her gaze, calm and steady, and the words died in Rosemary's throat. For the first time, Illyra wasn't the sister who served. She was the woman who had been claimed, who had been chosen. She was the one who was loved, and in that moment Rosemary, the golden one, looked small and faded, a portrait whose colors had begun to bleed. Later that morning, as the ranch work began, Illyra didn't join the crew in the bunkhouse. Leith had asked her to come with him. He drove her into the small town, to the land office. They were strangers to the clerk, just a handsome cowboy and the plain unmarried sister, but when they came out, Illyra was clutching a deed to a small parcel of land on the edge of the broken yoke, a piece of land that had once belonged to Leith's grandmother. "Can I build you a house here?" he said, his voice full of quiet confidence. "With a big porch so we can look at the stars at night, and a kitchen with a window that looks out onto the mountains. It ain't much, but it's ours." "It's everything," Illyra said, tears in her eyes again, but this time they were happy tears. They had a quiet wedding a month later on the porch of the new house. Only her father and the ranch foreman and his wife were there. A few of the hands from the bunkhouse came too, standing in a row, their hats in their hands, their faces uncharacteristically solemn. They had all witnessed the miracle. They had seen the plain, unmarried sister become the most beautiful bride in the county. Rosemary was conspicuously absent. She had packed her bags a week after the dance, a letter of protest left on the kitchen table, declaring that she was going back to New York where people appreciated her. No one in the house missed her. The life of the ranch went on, but with a new, lighter rhythm. Illyra no longer carried the weight of the world on her shoulders. She was building a world of her own with a man who saw her, who cherished her, who had looked at her and seen not a tool but a treasure. And in the long, slow Montana evenings, when the work was done and the stars came out to play, Illyra would sit on the porch of her new house, Leith's arm around her, and she would think about the whispers. They had called her plain and unmarried. Now, she was simply Mrs. Leith, and it was more than enough. It was everything. For in the eyes of the cowboy who had seen her soul, she had become more than a woman. She had become his home.